We're talking to Jackie Epping this afternoon, so welcome.
Thank you.
Jackie, thank you for showing up and taking some time with us. And so I just wanted to start out by asking you a little bit about your early career or early education, where you went to school, what you studied, what your interests were. Did you participate in athletics? A lot of the people I've interviewed did, or you know, sort of what got you into the physical activity realm and those sorts of things. So.
Sure. Well, I went to school at University of New Orleans, and originally I actually started as a pre-law major, and you know, as a lot of college students do, I guess, sort of, you know, in my first couple of years, couldn't really figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And one of the requirements of liberal arts, anyway, was to take a certain number of physical education classes. And I did that, and one of the classes I took was gymnastics. And we had to learn how to do a back flip as part of that. Well, I was terrified, to do that. And the gymnastics coach and teacher was able eventually to work with me so that I was able to accomplish that. And there was something about that that was so empowering for me that it kind of changed my attitude about what physical activity can do for people.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so the confidence that it can create, and when you think about it, it's accessible in some form or another to just about everyone. Anyway, I was a convert. I became a physical education major.
Oh, really?
I taught for a couple of years. I went back to graduate school and got a graduate degree there.
So as an undergrad, you're at where?
University of New Orleans.
Okay, and then what about your master's degree?
Also, University
of New Orleans. Oh, you stayed there?
Right.
Okay, and what did you do your master's degree in?
Well, I actually did sort of a clinical exercise physiology thesis. So I looked at the reliability and the validity of the Borg scale for perceived exertion for visually impaired people.
Wow.
You know, thinking, well, it might be different for folks who can't see because they don't have visual distraction and that sort of thing. It turns out it worked basically the same.
Same?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what? What did you do?
Well, and then I seem to have just kind of fallen into one bed of roses after another throughout my
A lot of people told me similar stories. They were living right or something.
Well, just about the time that I completed graduate school, physical activity and physical education in particular and public health started sort of being said in the same sentence. And that was about the time that the National Institutes of Health began funding some studies to increase physical activity in children to begin with and in school settings.
Do you remember the year or what time would that have been?
The particular study that I went to work for was, I think the pilot began in about 91. It was the Child and Adolescent Trial for Cardiovascular Health, and it was funded by NHLBI.
And then when did you finish your master's? A year or so before that?
No.
Or right at the same time?
Finished it in August, went to work.
There was the bed of roses, right?
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
I see what you're saying. Okay. So then you were on a big grant? Or?
Yes. It was a multi-component study, and it was actually designed to reduce risk factors in kids in elementary school. And so there were, you know, there was a nutritional component, there were some school policy and environmental changes, a parental component, and a physical activity, specifically a physical education component. And so I was hired along with, and it was a multi-site study, so it was actually conducted in 5 different sites around the country.
So did you stay in New Orleans then?
Right. And we just worked across sites to develop a curriculum, for example.
So was it tied in with the university then too, or was this outside of the
This
research
was
itself?
actually at Tulane University in New Orleans, and then other academic settings, you know, in these other sites across the country.
Okay.
Well, what I didn't realize at the time was that this turned out to be a landmark study, and so because of and I also just had the opportunity to work with some awesome folks and learned a great deal about study design, about implementation, about evaluation, and so, you know, when that made me competitive then for other sorts of studies like this, and then I was got a position at University of South Carolina I worked for Russ Pate there on another NHLBI funded study that looked at increasing physical activity in high school girls using a comprehensive school or coordinated school health model. So the idea was to go into through health services, through school policy, through physical education, through a variety of doors, if you will, into the school to see how that might help increase physical activity in girls, and that was a wonderful learning experience as well.
Was that a 2-year, 3-year thing?
I was there for almost 2 years.
So this is before Steve Blair came to South Carolina.
Right.
Yeah, back.
Yeah.
So was there just one part of that study that you focused on yourself, or what all did you do in that particular
study? Well, my title is Intervention Director, so I was actually responsible for developing the protocol for the intervention, the model curriculum, because one of the things that was different about this study than a lot of others is that there wasn't a turnkey kind of in-the-box intervention that schools just delivered. This was a cooperative venture, collaborative venture between the study staff and the school. So we provided them with a broad framework. Within that framework, they implemented the intervention within the context of their school environment.
So was this high schools then? So you had, how many schools participated?
12 intervention schools and 12 control schools throughout the state.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, it was.
That's a lot of work, though.
Well, it was, you know, and a fair amount of travel, you know, across the state. But it was a wonderful experience.
Difficult to get those schools to come on board and do that? I mean, that's a lot of extra work or whatever for these schools and teachers. And
that was a number of the schools had been recruited before I was brought on board, but I did go on some of those visits, and you're exactly right. One of the things that the schools are concerned about, and that individual teachers are concerned about, is, you know, are you going to add one more thing
I can see it,
to my day that we have to do? And that's part of why.
Plus something we've never done before, probably.
Right. So having this be a collaborative venture and being able to provide the resources and support that so we worked as a team rather than just saying, here's what you need to do, go do
this. Yeah. So that was 93?
That was 98, 99.
Oh, 98.
Yeah.
Okay.
The CATCH study was a 1-year pilot, 3-year intervention, and then follow-up, you know, 3 years later.
Yeah, so that's a chunk of time.
Yeah.
So then you're already in South Carolina. Did you go to Atlanta after that then?
Yeah. You know, another bed of roses. It turns out that the Physical Activity and Health branch at CDC was looking for someone with this particular skill set and background
and
at the time.
And you had been involved in all these good studies.
And I've been there ever since.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. So they're in Atlanta, right?
Right.
Yeah. All the rain and storms and I've been hearing about. It seems like Atlanta's been getting hit more than normal.
Yeah, we've had a strong spring, but I think like a lot of other places in the country and in the world now, actually, we're having some strange things happen with our weather patterns.
We've been talking about this all day to people from different parts, like Mike Bracco was saying, we've never had so much snow in Calgary before, and you know, that type of thing. So where along the way did you intersect with ACSM for the first time? Was it back in
University of New Orleans days? Yeah. I'm trying to remember now whether I actually joined the college as an undergraduate or a graduate, but I know that the faculty in my program at the university absolutely supported all of us in becoming members. You know, ACSM has always been sort of the gold standard in terms of, and I was also working a little bit in sort of a cardiac rehab track when I was in graduate school. I remember one of my first ACSM meetings, you know, as a poor graduate student, I had to scrape together the cash
to
really
get there, register
and one of those, you know, non-refundable, non-changeable tickets. Well, I got there and my hotel room was burglarized, and all my cash, I didn't have a credit card then, all my cash was stolen. And so actually my major professor, you know, covered the rest of the cost for me. And eventually, you know, the police came and they took a report, and eventually the hotel reimbursed me for that too. But, you know, so that's a vivid memory. And I had gone there to do networking and you know, job searching.
All of a sudden you're filling out police reports. And, oh, gee.
But so that was my, I think that was my first orientation to ACSM, and I've been involved, you know, except for a few short spurts where I let my membership expire, have been involved in the college ever since.
So you've gone to the national meetings initially, and then the summit. I suppose the summit is just perfect for a lot of the things that you want to accomplish. And
both meetings are actually. I think probably I went to the Health and Fitness Summit before I went to annual, because the ACSM certifications were held in such high regard also. Again, this is when aerobic teachers were popping out of the woodwork.
Yeah,
and
just anybody did it. And
so I wanted that certification, and at that time you actually took the exam at the Health and Fitness Summit.
I didn't know. I see what you're saying. So which one did you take?
It was, I think it was called Exercise Instructor at that time. So it was kind of a step below the Health and Fitness Instructor. It was like group instructor.
HFI, I think, was the top one at one. They've changed them, as you know, but they're hard. They're difficult.
Yeah. Well, and that's why they're the gold standard.
Yeah. So you came and took that, and now you're directly involved with the summit.
Yeah. Now, well, and that's a result of involvement in the college and going to the annual meetings. As you know, part of being a member of ACSM is service to the organization.
Yes.
And so I've been on the Health and Fitness Summit Planning Committee for, I guess, the last 4 years or so. I'm just about to rotate off of that.
Okay. And now, have you done anything with the Health and Fitness Journal as well, or on editorial boards or anything like that?
No, I recently received an invitation to submit a manuscript to current topics in sports medicine.
I just had something in there. That's neat. They've done a lot of good work with that.
Yeah, I was really pleased.
Yeah.
And I'm on the National Advisory Board for the American Fitness Index initiative, and then have worked on various aspects of exercise as medicine.
So do you do a lot of traveling with your regular job? I mean, does it entail getting out and meeting people and talking about all this stuff, or?
It's variable, you know, across the year. So I tend to have a fair amount of travel in the spring, kind of slows down a little in the summer, picks back up in the early fall, and then around the holidays it falls off. So, so my travel actually sort of runs a little parallel to when these public health national meetings are, when ACSM is, the National Society of Physical Activity Practitioners in Public Health has their annual meeting in the spring, and then sometimes to provide some trainings or do some presentations, you know, like that.
Now, do you still, are you involved in more grants or not? Or, you know, and I guess people are applying to the CDC for grants.
Yeah.
So do you get involved in sort of selecting grant applicants and that type of thing?
Yes. Excuse me, CDC is more well, a couple of things I think to know about CDC is, one is a lot of people have the misperception that we have the level of resources that the National Institutes of Health do, and we don't.
I think that is a perception.
Yeah, it's kind of like a penny to $100 bill.
A wrong perception,
But,
right?
yeah. And we also have more limited mechanisms by which we can fund, and we always have a strong mandate to fund state health agencies and now communities, as you may know, for programs. But we do use a cooperative agreement mechanism and sometimes contracts to be able to fund initiatives, and yes, so we're involved, and I'm involved sometimes in creating those kind of in-house proposals and then getting them reviewed for approval or not, and then also reviewing external proposals that come in and then managing those cooperative agreements.
I think one of the great things was that Surgeon General's report on physical activity.
The 96 report.
Yeah, I mean, that was just landmark.
Seminal, yeah. Yeah, it was. And it led to, I mean, when you think about the amount of activity in physical activity in public health before the Surgeon General's report and after the Surgeon General's report, it's phenomenal.
Yeah,
we have the first federal physical activity guidelines for Americans in 2008.
Yeah.
You know, we now have a national physical activity plan for the first time in the history of this country. We have now the first professional organization of people who practice in physical activity in public health. I mean, each of those is huge in its own right.
Yeah, yeah. I was trying to look, as a historian, it interested me to look at when the Surgeon General's report on smoking came out and tobacco, and how long it took for things like you just mentioned for physical activity to kick in. I mean, there was a pretty long time there before there was any real significant changes.
Well, it was interesting to see that the Surgeon General's report for tobacco, and not unlike what happened with physical activity, provided the impetus for two things to happen, I think. One was to sort of allow the grassroots movement to gain more visibility and more strength, so the non-smokers' rights movement, but also to provide the impetus for policy changes then, which is that's when we really started seeing the decline, when you couldn't smoke on airplanes anymore, and then you couldn't smoke in government buildings, and you know, and so on and so forth. And that's when we really started to see, and then when resources got put into state health agencies, for example, and that was all a consequence of the Surgeon General's report.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing the same fallout now in a good way from the physical activity report, you know, the same kind of things where you can say, gee, here's this body of evidence that shows very clearly the value of physical activity. So what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And go from there. Oh, what else was I going to ask you? It's too late in the day.
Oh, I hear.
Oh, I know. Just in your opinion, coming to the summit first to do the certification. How do you think it's grown and developed, and do you think it's sort of going on the right way, or do you have any feelings about the value of it, the direction of it?
Of the summit
Of the
we're talking
summit.
particularly?
Yeah, in particular, yeah.
Well, certainly I think there's a lot of value to it. And one of the ways that we can kind of tell is that because of the number of people who come back year after year. I think something like only 20% of people each year are new to the conference. So that tells me that, that people are coming back because they're getting something that they need out of this. Not only the training and education that can come out of hearing these presentations, but also the networking, among the participants, and the sort of, I don't know, you go to a national meeting and you just kind of get pumped, and you go home with a new found sense of motivation.
That's what I was telling
commitment.
Mike, that just being around these people, I feel energized.
Yes.
Everyone's really pumped up, and it's a good feeling, actually. And,
Yeah, it
and
is.
coming from rainy Seattle, actually being in the sun helps too.
Oh, you got outside?
A little bit, yeah. Yesterday, yeah.
Good for
Really?
you.
How did you do that?
Really? There's sun out there?
That's what I was saying earlier. All the hotels look alike, when you go to the airport, maybe you get to see the outside.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that again.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, I told you time really flies, so
We've done 30 minutes.
almost, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thank you for taking the time to visit and talk. And
It's my pleasure.
I think working for the CDC must just be really fun. And, you guys do such good stuff. And
Oh, thank you. I'll
Well-
take that back home.
well, just having, just recognizing physical activity now and looking at this over time and what the CDC used to do as compared to the big shift to chronic illness now,
Right.
and how important that has become, and to be able to, to keep up with it and lead that, I think is really, really crucial. And I think there's a lot of people that just don't realize it yet. They don't get it yet.
We have to focus on the prevention
Yeah.
of chronic disease.
It not
which
only
means-
makes sense, it saves money,
Exactly.
major money.
Right.
And I work in a medical school, and the model is still a sick model. And that's what I'm trying to do, is, at least trying to get people to realize that in the past, medicine didn't operate on a sick model. They actually operated on a wellness model. And until we had big changes in surgery and vaccinations and things like this, there was a sea change. And now the pendulum has to start swinging back again,
Yeah, I
more
agree.
towards the wellness model.
And systems changes are difficult, and they don't happen easily, and they don't happen quickly.
They don't happen
certainly.
fast. They're slow.
But I think, don't you, that we're at least facing in the right
absolutely.
direction now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I put a lot of stock in the exercise as medicine thing. I think that was a marvelous thing. I just wrote Bob Salas asked me to write in the current sports medicine journal. I wrote a big historical article in the March issue on exercise as medicine.
I read your article.
Okay. And basically I said, this is not new, we just forgot about it. And we need to get back to that and try to explain in the little short space they gave me what went wrong and what we need to do. And I think your group, really has to play that significant role
Right.
there and try to bridge the gap between schools other populations that don't get it, when you're talking about physical activity and diet and, and things like this. And I think the big issue is adherence. How do you get people to do this stuff?
Well, it's interesting because, well, I'm going to back up just a second because, in speaking of our role, we see our role in exercise as medicine largely as part of this whole, systems change, which means that people are not only referred with respect to individual behavior, but then when they go into the communities, they have access to these opportunities for physical activity.
Right. There's something there for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yes, that I think is a strong role, an important role for public health to take in all of this. And then, as you say, to sort of complete to work at the other end of the continuum as well, so that health and fitness professionals are well trained, well prepared, well certified, such that they can work then with the healthcare system in a way that gets people active. And we still are looking at what kinds of things are associated with long-term adherence. And that's where my interest in dog walking comes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And why I think the Exercise as Medicine initiative is looking at that too, because it's pretty accessible, it's pretty adaptable, it can reach a large segment of the population, and we suspect anyway, we need some more longitudinal studies, but we suspect that this is something to which people could adhere for a long time, rather than joining a health club or taking a class and when it's over in 6 weeks or 6. Exactly.
Yeah, and studying the humanities all my life, the humankind is very similar over time.
Yeah.
And people don't like to do things out of their comfort zone. They don't like to do things that aren't easy. And we have to realize that and adapt to it, mold things so it does become doable for people.
Yeah.
And I think people do know what they should do, but they don't do it.
And that's
for whatever reason, and that's the nut you've got to crack, to get that.
And we need
out.
to remember, I think, that it's not enough for people to be educated, to know, as you say, people do, for the most part, know.
Yeah.
And it's not enough even to get them motivated if the barriers, if we make physical activity the difficult choice, which is what it is right now in our country.
Absolutely.
We need to work toward making that the easy choice for people.
And the fun choice, and
Right.
Yeah. If it's work, they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So anyhow, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It was nice meeting you.
You too.
I appreciate it very much.